All right. Hopefully you got recording in progress there. Very good. So without further ado, I want to jump into today, and I really appreciate Dan Toma joining us. And so, as you can see on the screen, Dan is co-founder and innovation coach for Outcome. As you can see behind him, a great screen there, his company, and he's also an author. So Innovation Accounting, which you see on the right, and you also see in my bookshelf behind me back here, and the Corporate Startup, which can also find back there. And as you see here, Corporate Startup, his co-authors Esther and Tendai. Tendai spoke for us last month, a few weeks ago, and as one of the co-founders and executives at Strategizer with Alex Osterwalder, who created the business model canvas, value prop canvas, and others. And one of the things that we look at for innovation is how do we measure and manage these things, right? Accounting. And this is what Dan is going to talk about today, which I'm really excited for. Dan has obviously a lot of other accolades here as far as an entrepreneur, a mentor, and guest speaker, and MBA. And love the Future Shapers as far as a contributor in the World Economic Forum Transformation Working Group. But today we're really going to focus on innovation accounting. And whether you're in a startup or a small, mid-sized firm, how do we measure and manage and look at the lens of accounting and finance when you don't really know what you're supposed to measure because it's new, right? We don't know what we don't know when you're talking about startups and entrepreneur, or even entrepreneur, corporate innovation within a company. And so I'm very happy that Dan's with us today to talk about how we look at innovation accounting from a different lens. So without further ado, Dan, I'm going to turn it over to you, but I'm going to moderate and I'll keep track of questions that are popping up. And at the end, we'll come back and we'll open it up for Q&A, and then I'll wrap us up. But I'll leave it to you to share your screen and take us on a journey.
Thank you very much, Brian. Good morning or good afternoon to the people in the audience. I don't know where you guys are calling in from. I mean, there was a list at the beginning, but then I had to log out and the list disappeared. So yeah, good morning or good afternoon. Honored to be on this call, Brian. Again, thank you very much for reaching out and for having me. Yeah, today we're going to talk about innovation accounting, and I can tell you this is something that's been bugging me for years. I mean, the first book I wrote, The Corporate Startup, actually originated in me having a corporate job. And as I was working in the product department of a large telco company, I realized that the way this company was building their digital products, in particular new products, was exactly the opposite as we were doing in the startup world. My background is actually in entrepreneurship, so my first job was my own company. So 10 years down the line, I joined this company, this large telco company, and I realized that they were starting from a lot of money up front, and then they would code something, and then they would do a focus group, and then they would ask people what they wanted, and then they would probably scrap everything because it didn't match what people wanted. So I said to the executives there, like, guys, you have everything figured out. It's just that it's the other way around. You should start from asking people what their pain point is, what problems they have, then build something, then do some focus groups, and then invest a lot. And this is how the corporate startup was actually born. I was trying to document the changes and the way we were approaching making this particular company more innovative. But to be honest with you, one of the things I always wanted to write about was how do we measure all this stuff? Because traditional accounting doesn't work in the world of startups, doesn't work in the world of innovation. And by doesn't work, I don't mean that we should just scrap everything on financial accounting, not attend the corporate accounting classes and all that stuff. I'm saying it doesn't work early stage. It doesn't work until you have some revenue coming in or until you reach a break-even point. The financial accounting standards, the way they are built now, are only considering organizations that are to some extent big in size, and not just that, but they have a lot of cash coming in and going out. Also, another problem that traditional accounting has is that it's a practice that's rooted in the world of physical assets. And as we all know, with a lot of startups and a lot of new businesses nowadays, it's not that much about the value of a physical asset as much as it is about what you do with that physical asset. If we all come together on this call and we try to, let's say, start up an airline business, right? We can definitely do it. We bring money together and we buy the planes and we buy everything that's needed in terms of physical assets to run that particular business. However, and again, I'm assuming this, none of us here on the call are actually in the know when it comes to operating an airline. And again, we will probably fail. We've invested a lot. We have the physical assets, but we're going to fail as a business. Again, this comes to show the fact that the physical assets are not necessarily a differentiator in the world that we live in. Your ability to turn those physical assets into something useful, into value to a certain group or to other people in the community, it's what people are willing to pay. It's what's going to make the difference between you owning assets and you having a profitable business. And in essence, in innovation accounting, we're just discussing about a system of indicators, if you want, a system of indicators that's able to help executives and business owners understand if their organizations are on the right path with innovation before financial accounting kicks in, before financial accounting takes over and is telling us if we are profitable. Innovation accounting was never written to replace financial accounting. One, because financial accounting standards are something that is mandated by government, so you have to report in those, no matter if you're early stage or late stage, if you're a Series A or if you're a 100-year-old company. And second, that was never the purpose of the book. What we wanted to do, we wanted to basically create a system of indicators that people can use whenever they want to assess whether or not their company is innovative, whether or not a particular company they want to invest in has potential to grow, whether or not a particular startup or a particular innovation team is on the right track to profitability. Now, I would be curious from the people joining here, and again, if you're shy on the mic, you can just write the answers in chat. Um, what do you expect from this session? What do you guys want to get out of this? That's going to be very important for me because we can talk about innovation accounting from A to Z, but I don't think that's going to deliver a lot of value. I will be more interested to jumping on topics that you guys really have a need for.
Feel free to put in the chat or go ahead and unmute and
Yeah, just
say what
unmute.
you'd like to hear about. Yeah. And Dan, are you gonna do you want to share
Yeah,
your photos if you want?
yeah, if you don't mind, I'm curious. I was intrigued by the title about the effectiveness of the ecosystem, right? Which we have our nodes of what we're doing. Awesome presentation at GFX last Thursday out in Roseville. You know, we're working on the Northern California Innovation District here, kind of along the Highway 50 corridor. Is there a way, and is what you're talking about going to help us know if what we're doing is moving the needle collectively? I'm also interested as for individual companies, which I think that's what I'm hearing here, is if you could, Dan, if you could speak to that, as if there's things that we can be doing. We're a kind of a nonprofit public partnership entity. Is I want to know and have tools available to be able to go back to our, not only our staff, but our electeds and boards. Hey, what we're doing is making a difference. But then also we have pitch nights where we have companies come in. We've moved over $4 million in the last 2 years in investment dollars out of our facility, is to get access for our startups, particularly, as to making sure that they are on the right path so they don't go spend money and rabbit hole stuff that leads actually to their extinction. So I'm interested in kind of both of those, please.
Right. Sure, Phil. My pleasure. Before I share some slides on, how innovation accounting works, because I'm going to share those slides in order to support my answer to you. I want to address one part of your question right off the bat. It's very important how you measure success, and this is very much connected to how companies and organizations define innovation. Right? We talk about innovation accounting. Tell me how you define it, because some people might define it as just incremental innovation. And if you define innovation as incremental as just incremental, then the way you measure it, the way you set up some indicators is going to be different from a company that defines innovation as totally radical. So just as I said, it's very important for you guys to define what success looks like. Are you interested in a certain number of startups appearing in the ecosystem every year, or are you interested in a certain amount of deal flow, or are you interested in attracting a certain number of investors? These are all things that you guys will have to decide whenever we talk about how you define success. The only thing you need to be mindful of is the difference between key results indicators and KPIs, key performance indicators. The result indicators are basically what we get at the end of an activity. What the KPI is, it's basically a way to measure the process that's taking us to the result. To give you a more concrete example, if we are to manage a company, doesn't matter the business line, and let's put innovation aside for a second. If we are managing a company and we're interested in the profit of that company, or in a certain return on assets, or whatever it may be, that's actually a result indicator. We're interested in the financial results of the company at the end of a quarter or at the end of the year. The problem is that results can't be influenced directly. If you want to influence results, you need to influence the process that gets you to the results. However, a lot of executives, at least people that I have met, don't really understand the value creation process in their business. And this is why they're so focused on what's our quarter-to-quarter profitability or year-over-year profitability. Profitability can't be changed if you are not looking at the processes that you are using to get to profitability. If you wanna cut corners, you can always sell the building, right? And at the end of that quarter, you're going to be super profitable. But obviously, this is not going to be sustainable, because the next quarter you won't have much to sell. So it's very important to distinguish between a result indicator and a process indicator. And I'm going to show you an example of how a company in engineering is actually doing that, and how they are approaching this whole thinking regarding results indicators and process indicators. Give me 1 second to share my screen, and I'm going to take you through bit of concepts regarding innovation accounting, and then at the end, tying everything together is going to be that case, if you want, of a Norwegian engineering company actually implementing innovation accounting. Give me 1 second.
No problem, Dan. Take your time. I put some other ideas for the rest of you in the chat. Just to stimulate your brain cells, whether it's explore versus exploit, pirate metrics, traction versus revenue, risk and experiments, investing and learning versus profits. So obviously ecosystem, I saw a hand up as well. I must have said ecosystem, but I think offense, you had your hand up. So feel free to add to any of those, or say yes, to one of the ones I listed there for you. All right, Eslam, can you share practical use of tools and tactics of how to measure innovation by dollars? Okay, well, definitely we're talking about measuring it as we go for sure.
Cool. just a couple of slides here on innovation accounting. So as I mentioned in the intro, innovation accounting is not here to replace financial accounting or financial accounting standards. It's there to complement. It's there to tell us if something is on the right track before financial accounting kicks in and takes over. This said, this is the definition of what an innovation accounting system is. Again, this is from the book, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time reading this, but in essence, it's a set of indicators. It's never one indicator, and this is one of the issues that I've noticed with a lot of our clients in our consultancy practice, is that people try to boil everything down to one indicator and say that's the way to measure innovation. Nothing further from the truth, actually, because innovation it's a complex activity, and if you're just focusing on one indicator, then you are probably creating the right environment for people to game the system and just do everything in their power to report a good one indicator. If you are using multiple indicators to measure the performance of your innovation system, then you have a bigger chance of those measurements being accurate. Now, very important again, I've mentioned the fact that it's a set of indicators. Actually, these indicators are split into layers. In the book, we talk about 4 layers, starting from the very top. How do we measure our overall ecosystem or system of innovation? So not just internal innovation, but also external innovation as well. One layer below is measuring our funnel, our innovation funnel performance. So how do we know if the things that we have currently in the funnel are working, they are on the right track? Because the funnel of today is going to be the portfolio of tomorrow. The things that we have in the funnel today will slightly in the future gradually take over and become the core business of the company in the years to come. If you want to remember, I don't know, like 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, where YouTube was in terms of the revenue it was contributing to Google, and where this particular service is now, I think 10, 15 years ago was just a big question mark. They've bought the service, they've bought a startup, they were really gambling, and now YouTube is, I think, generating as much revenue for Alphabet as the ad service does. And probably in the years to come, it will just increase, and gradually YouTube will become the core business of Alphabet in terms of revenue. So it's very important to measure the healthiness of your funnel. So that's another layer of indicators. But the funnel is made up of individual teams. So you have the third layer, if you want, or first layer. I don't know how to think of it. If you want to think about it top down or bottom up, it's around how do we measure teams. So how do we measure an individual team? If we're sitting with them, if we're sitting with the startup, be it external or internal startup idea, how do we know if that group of entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs is on the right track to becoming profitable or to having a scalable business? And lastly, this is pretty much the glue that keeps everything together, is the layer on culture and capability. So here you have indicators that talk about, do we have an embedded culture of innovation, or do we have the certain skills that are needed? We usually don't talk that much about this layer because this is very specific to every company. Every different company has their own skills they're looking for. They want to define their own culture. So we usually don't talk about this layer. It's important. We do mention it in the book. We actually have a full chapter on it. But whenever we discuss about the innovation accounting system, we refer to the three layers on top. The one on measuring the system, the one on measuring the funnel, the one on measuring the teams. These all layers are connected through process and governance. There is no one single indicator that is not connected with anything else in the system, because indicators, they need to pass information from the very bottom of the organization, from a team, all the way to an executive. It will be quite funny to see an executive being interested every week in all the projects that are going on in the company at that moment in time. However, they will be interested in the overall performance of their innovation system. This is why the strategic layer is there, to aggregate information from multiple teams and present them to a board and say, look, this is how much we're spending on innovation quarter over quarter, and this is how much we're expecting, or this is how much we've been making, or this is how our portfolio has changed as a result of the investments. Now,
Sorry to interrupt
couple
you.
of go
Can
ahead.
you? My picture is covering a little bit of your slides. If you want to minimize me or move me off your screen, they're seeing that there. There you
Oh,
go.
here we go. Here we go. But
Cool.
can you guys also see me at the same time? Because I know that Zoom has this issue. If I minimize you, I'm minimizing myself as well.
You were talking. We just see
My slides.
your
Right.
slide. We don't see you. We see your placeholder picture in place of you.
Okay. In which case, I would much rather be seen on camera and have you at the bottom left
That's
corner, if
fine.
that's
There you go. As
okay.
long as it doesn't cover content.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It covers our logo, so it's fine. Another thing I wanted to mention here, uh, it's a complex system, and I think I have a picture of the system in one of the slides. Here we go. The idea is that there's a lot of companies that are doing great things on measuring innovation. However, I haven't seen, and again, I might be looking for through a very small window at what's going on in the world right now. But what I have noticed is that there is no one single company that has figured the entire system out. There are companies that are great at measuring some parts of the innovation system, and there are companies that are great at measuring other parts. I haven't seen a lot of companies integrating everything that they measure into a very coherent system. So examples of companies that are great at measuring their overall innovation performance will be the logos that you see in front of you. DuPont, one of my favorites, actually. Cisco, again, one of my favorites. A lot of inspiration for the innovation accounting book came through conversations with executives in these two companies. The big blue IBM is there. Gore, DMV is a Norwegian company. We're going to talk about them in a few slides. Companies that are great at measuring funnel. Probably you've seen some of these logos before. Maybe you haven't seen DNB before. It's a Norwegian bank. Telefonica is the largest carrier, mobile carrier in Spain, but also in Latin America. So again, they're pretty good at measuring their funnel performance. In terms of measuring teams, Microsoft and Google are pretty decent companies when it comes to measuring that. If you want to talk about companies that are great at measuring their innovation culture, Zappos, yes, you probably heard about that. DBS, if you guys are calling in from Asia, you've probably seen this bank, or maybe you're banking with them. They're based out of Singapore. Pretty cool stuff what they're doing in terms of measuring the innovation culture that they have. Now, I told you that the innovation system is pretty complex, and yes, it is. And again, if you're opening the book, you're going to see this image in the front cover. If you flip the front cover, it's there. Don't get overwhelmed. It's not important to remember where everything flows to. This is more a map of everything that's going on into a system. And again, as I mentioned earlier, you have these three layers. You have the top layer for executives that are interested in how does our innovation system function? Does it function correctly? Do we have the right return? Is it a profitable activity to continue doing? Then you have the funnel layer right in the middle, and then you have the team layer at the bottom. Now, this mentioned, I want to skip to a case example. I'm going to skip all these slides that I prepared here because they are not that relevant. Let's discuss about the case example. So how does innovation accounting look in practice? And the case example is focused on this Norwegian company called DMVGL. They are an engineering company. They do certification and classification of equipment, in particular maritime equipment. So if your car needs to go to have an annual inspection, proving that it's worthy for the roads, so do ships. Ships need to have a paper saying that they are worthy for the sea. Otherwise, they won't be allowed into harbors, or they will be damaging the environment, or all these other things. Same goes for oil rigs or offshore wind installations. All of these things need to be certified. One of the companies in the world that's doing that is DMV. They are present in more than 100 countries. They've been in business for 150 years, and they are actually the leader when it comes to classification of maritime equipment. About 25% of the world fleet is certified and classified by DMV. We had the pleasure of working with DMV for about 3 years, helping them transform, building their innovation system. I'm not presenting this case because we worked with them, but I'm really, really proud of what they've achieved. Plus, I can give you an example of how the system works by having first-hand information about what this particular company is doing, how they're thinking about it. Now, remember this spaghetti, as Esther likes to call it. This particular spaghetti of the innovation system, as I said, might be very complicated or very complex to understand now. But if we look at it from the perspective of an executive, and in this case was the CFO of DMV. Let's assume, and again, these are all made up numbers now. Let's assume the company wants to have a 25% of their revenue in 2025 coming from products that they launched in the past 3 years. So let's assume it was 2022 when we had this conversation with the CFO, and the board's vision is that 25% of the revenue of DMV by 2025 needs to come from new initiatives. So what they're basically saying, they're saying that they're going to measure revenue, which is fine. But saying that 25% of your revenue needs to come from new initiatives means that you are actually measuring an indicator called New Product Vitality Index, NPVI. This is not something that we create in innovation accounting. This is something that's been around since the 80s in 3M and DuPont. And I think that Cisco really loved this indicator at one point. They had their P&L responsible executives be judged on their performance through their contribution to the NPVI. So again, this is just telling us that NPVI is telling us the percentage of a company's revenue coming from products that they launched in the past 3 years or 5 years. It's going to be up to you to define how you set up that NPVI figure. Usually the standard is about 3 years, but you can stretch it to 5 if you are in a slower industry. Now, if we know what our NPVI figure needs to be, we are really interested in terms of our innovation funnel in the number of ideas that we have in each stage. Obviously, in order to have revenue, we have to have a lot of ideas in the late stages of the funnel, or even getting outside of our innovation funnel and being implemented in our portfolio. So it's very important to measure how many startups we have in our funnel, how many innovation teams we have in our funnel, and where are they in terms of the product lifecycle, in which stage of development are they? Because if we don't have anything now in our funnel, it will be pretty impossible for us to get to that NPVI figure if we need to start kicking things off after 1 year has passed and we have only 3 years in total. So it's very important to measure those. But in order to measure those and in order to progress those, very important to progress those ideas from one stage to the other, we have to have executives that are confident in the ventures. If an executive, were, we call it in the book the venture board, if the venture boards are not confident in the evidence teams are bringing forward, they are not progressing the teams from one stage to the other. If I don't see enough evidence that particular team needs to advance or it needs further investment, I'm not going to invest further in that. I'm just going to keep the team where it is. And unless they're proving to me and providing me with evidence that there is a need in the market, I'm not going to move them from one stage to the other. So in order for ideas to move, they need to have they need to work on the confidence that they are that the venture board decision makers have in them. Now, that particular confidence is connected with the confidence of the venture board in every single item that sits underneath that particular stage of the product lifecycle. So in the product lifecycle, you have the stages, but for every stage of development, teams will have to work on something different that's relevant to their particular maturity. As my co-author Tendai says, and I think he mentioned it in the corporate startup, is that innovation accounting is all about asking the right question at the right time. So think about these key success factors as the right questions at the right time. If I'm not seeing if I don't have enough confidence in every single item, I don't have a holistic confidence in the team. If I don't have enough confidence in that particular team, the team will not progress from one stage to the other. If the team is not progressing from one stage to the other, we are not going to hit our NPVI targets. But where does this confidence come from? It comes from learning velocity. It comes from the team doing experiments and getting learnings. We're not talking about experiment velocity here, because experiments, if you're just measuring experiment velocity, then people can just game the system and just claim everything is an experiment. It's very important to look at their learning velocity, how fast they are learning in a unit of time. They might do an experiment, they might learn through other means. It's very important to track that learning velocity. If they're learning a lot, they are in essence increasing the confidence decision makers having them. Through that confidence increase, teams are being moved from one stage to the other of the product lifecycle, impacting the NPVI later on once they are at revenue. So this is how people in DMVGL, this is how CFOs like Thomas are thinking about the system, the innovation accounting system. It's like, okay, we want to get a lot of revenue, or we have a certain revenue figure we are aiming for. Let's see what happens downstream from us. What are the things that we can influence? What are the things that we can measure in order to hit those NPVI targets? It's not about only starting up a lot of new ideas, starting up a lot of new teams, kicking off a lot of innovation or entrepreneurship programs. It's all about measuring it and knowing how far are we, or how likely are we to hit our NPVI targets given everything that's going on. Now, for this to work, they had a very clear system, very clear process of measuring and working with innovation teams. And this process was repeating every 3 weeks. So every 3 weeks, teams were working on their ideas, and teams were meeting with the venture boards, with the decision makers every 3 weeks. Teams were presenting the progress they've made on the key success factors relevant for their maturity stage. They were in a certain maturity stage of the product lifecycle. They had very clear key success factors. They were presenting the work they've done in the past 3 weeks in those areas. Now, the teams were also reporting the cost and potential revenue of their idea in an innovation accounting software. And then decision makers will rank the confidence they had in the team's answers to those particular key success factors following their presentation. Now, they recorded this particular confidence in the tool, and they were taking a decision. So every 3 weeks, the executives, the decision makers, were taking a decision about every single item in the company's portfolio. And this decision can be stopped, meaning, guys, you've been at this for quite some time. There is very little evidence this is moving forward, or there's a need in the market for your idea. Let's stop it now. The other possibility was to give the teams a continued decision, meaning you are on the right track, you are making progress. However, I'm not really sure if I should progress to the next stage and invest further in you. Please continue doing what you're doing. It doesn't mean you're stopping. It means you're doing great work. Please continue what you're doing. And then the final decision was basically move to the next stage. Look, you've been at this for quite some time. It's clear that it makes sense for us to unlock another financing round for you, move on to the next stage of development, and then we meet again with you in 3 weeks. So again, this process was repeating every 3 weeks, and they were able to gather data about each team. This data was aggregated at funnel level and given people like the CFO. I'm going to skip this because this is about the software part. They were giving people like the CFO here, Thomas, an idea of what's going on in the innovation system. How does it work? Is there potential for what's now in the pipeline to become super successful for the company financially in 3 or 5 years? So to kind of like answer Phil's question earlier, Phil, would be very important for you guys to define what are your top layer indicators here, and then try to understand downstream what will be the indicators that you are tracking, and this will be leading indicators. Okay, I'm looking at this. I know that in the future I can expect whatever from my practice. Again, this particular map is designed in the context of a corporation, but it can very well be adapted for the context of a nonprofit or for the context of a government organization. You can just replace NPVI with any other indicator, and you can replace a lot of these indicators with stuff that is relevant for you. Looking at the time, I want to take some questions from the audience. I want to, again, my goal is to meet you guys where you are. I think this particular case example gave you an idea of how does innovation accounting look like in practice. I'll be curious to get some reactions from the room. I'm gonna stop my screen share so I can see you guys in full screen.
Very good. Who would like to throw out a question? Dan. Anybody? Don't be shy. It's okay. Aaron has a question.
Yes. Hi. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. So I've been part of these innovation cycles before, primarily in the corporate world, and in, I'd say, the operationalizing phases of 1 or 2 startups in my career. One thing I've seen consistently is that there is this sort of gap in that the process seems to overtake the concept of, customer value or customer value impact and customer journey. And I found that tends to get lost. And then I'd say the last piece of that, or I'd say the additional piece to that, is the whole sales journey around that customer journey. And I think a lot of that happens. I've seen from my experience that there's a lot of unknowns there, but I also think there's this fear that when you start locking in, some prototype pilot like customers, that there's just a lot of disjointed value. And, it's like, thank you for this, because you put a bunch of things together that I never could think could be together. And I value them all separately, but I don't know how to value your thing. And I found that a lot of innovation teams don't necessarily want that feedback, or the company doesn't either, because it forces some pretty brutal decisions, usually from the rest of their product suites, right? That are a lot of this disjointed value. That's why you even got the chance to have these meetings with the client, right? So it's this,
Right.
There's a disruption cycle there that most organizations don't want to take on until they're forced to, or it's too late. And I found that little Groundhog Day I've experienced, a bunch of times because of it. And I'm just wondering your experience on that, and contrasting that to sort of we'll call it the lean startup, Google Sprinty, kind of just shoot it out of the cannon and hope it hits something kind of approach, which I think is great if you have nothing, but I also think it's not very mature, and clients just don't tend to be able to absorb that. I mean, clients aren't going to say, do a Google Sprint to me. Right. I mean, that doesn't tend to, I've never heard anyone say that. So, but yeah, so I asked a couple of questions there. Hopefully it made some sense. And then once again, thank you for your presentation too. It was great. And thanks for the Carlson Center.
Right. I was not sure I heard a very specific question, Aaron. I heard all of the great reflections that
Yeah.
echoed some of the things that we've discussed earlier. If you have something very specific.
Yeah. So the
answer it.
customer journey and the value impact map, where does that fit in here? Because I think, or my question is, where would the innovation accounting process force some accountability around that, so that it
Right.
just doesn't become its own freight train that just sort of runs
Right.
independent of
Perfect.
the customer journey and the value impact map?
Right. Perfect. Now I get it. I can tell you that I have experienced it firsthand when I was with a corporate organization, full time employed. They had a very rigid process that I decided not to follow because it's not in the interest of the products that we were building. And then I had some executives criticizing me for not following the process. They were not really interested in the fact that my teams that I was coaching were successful. They were more interested in me following the process. And I was always challenging. I was like, well, how about we change the process? Right? If my process, leads to results, how about we change the old process to this new one? I think that from the perspective of innovation accounting, innovation accounting won't work if you don't have a product lifecycle framework. And what you are mentioning should be embedded in the product lifecycle framework. Product lifecycle, for other people that are on the call and might not know what it is, it's basically step by step. I mentioned it a couple of times on the call, and I apologize for not clarifying this term sooner. It's basically stages that an idea has to go through from the moment it's created to the moment it ends up in the market. If you've read Steve Blank, you probably heard about problem solution fit, product market fit, and all those kind of things. Those are stages in essence. Every organization should create their own product lifecycle that's very much connected with the way they want to operate the business, the type of innovation they want to do, the peculiarities of the industry that they are playing in. So, Aaron, to your point, it's very important to connect those things around customer with the product lifecycle. For example, you should not be allowed to pass stage 1 of the product lifecycle if you haven't figured out who the customer is and what is the problem that they're having, and not just you filling out the form, but bring me evidence as a decision maker. Innovation accounting will be able to track that in terms of, look, 90% of our teams are not progressing stage 1, means that 90% of our people don't understand who the customer is and what problems they have. Or if 90% pass and we end up killing them in stage 4 or 5 of the product lifecycle because nobody wants the product and it's totally not profitable for us to invest, it means that the decision makers don't understand what does the customer actually mean, or what does understanding the customer actually mean. So again, and we mentioned it in the book, and I mentioned it to all my clients, if you want to implement innovation accounting, you need to have a robust product lifecycle framework, or ideal lifecycle framework, whatever you want to call it, and you have to have trained decision makers that are meeting with the teams on a constant basis and keeping them in check. Again, think about startups and startup investors. They know exactly the stage a team is at. They're asking those right questions, and then if there is evidence, they invest some more. If there is no evidence, they stop investing and they discontinue that particular initiative. So, Aaron, it's all about the product lifecycle, man.
Yeah, I'll add in. Great, thank you, Dan. Just so, Aaron, I think you've been with us once or twice before. Maybe it looks familiar, but we use both the strategizer framework as well as the lean stack with Ash. So, they're both from really the same place, more focused on corporate versus, entrepreneur. But pirate metrics, problem solution fit, customer product fit, then product market fit. We take them through the customer journey, and you have to hit those milestones, right, and experiment quickly, to Dan's point, because if no one cares about it and you can't make money and you can't build it, then what the hell are you doing? So the innovation accounting piece is really, well, how do we as the company, I'm working with Fortune 500 ones like Dan, like, how do we then view the lens of what does success look like? How do we measure and track and monitor to say, yes, go forward, and, you've passed stage 1 to stage 2. But none of that matters if you don't have a really good process to discovery and gather insights and validate and experiment and, to get along the way.
Yeah. As I said, we had many clients coming to us saying, "Oh, we want to implement innovation accounting. The book is so cool." And then if you pop the hood and you look what's underneath, you realize they have no innovation process, they have no product life cycle, and their executives are not really trained to be VC investors. And I was like, guys, innovation accounting is a luxury problem for you. You are nowhere near that. We usually start with measuring the innovation maturity of a company, and I actually had a slide on this. There is a maturity curve, and you need to be quite mature in order to need innovation accounting. As sexy as the term might sound, it's actually very few organizations that I've met that have that particular problem of not having data. A lot of organizations are struggling with not having a good practice, not having a good process. Product lifecycle is everywhere, or they are asking all the wrong questions at the wrong time. Again, innovation accounting would just be there telling you that, no, this is not working, or in some cases can't even be implemented. Can we get another question? We still have like 5 minutes to go, or 4 minutes to go.
Anyone else? I'll look in chat.
Pretty big funneling problems, if that makes sense, right? Where your ideation cycles were highly incremental in the past, because, it didn't take a lot to get 10% return. But now when you're trying to get 30% compounded, there's just a lot of ideas. There's just aren't that many ideas that are 30% compounders for real. And so how have you, or do you see how innovation accounting can portfolioize that process more effectively? Because I still see that process is very haphazard, very ad hoc. It's very gut feel, if that makes sense. Right. Everyone does the work, business case, and then it goes into the gut feel team. And then, answer comes out?
Right. It's I actually wrote a piece about it a few months ago where I was criticizing myself and I was criticizing the innovation community for the things that we've been saying for the past 10 years or so, where we were saying, oh, with innovation, you don't need to have a business case. Business cases are not for innovators. Don't do that. Go and focus on experiments. No, I probably matured in the past 10 years. I would say that. I became a bit more pragmatic when it comes to innovation. I say, like, yes, do start with a business case, but it's not about doing the gut feel thing that you just mentioned. Is how you do the business case that's important. And what we have proposed in the book, but also in our work, is we propose best case scenario. Every team does a Monte Carlo simulation of their business case, because Monte Carlo simulations, and again, Aaron, you're nodding, so you know what I'm talking about. They give those upper bounds and lower bounds. Where do you get those numbers? Where do you get those numbers? Right? They can be from the gut feel, but if you have a good system where a decision maker is there, somebody that's knowledgeable, well, or you have good innovation coaches working with the teams, those particular upper bounds and lower bounds come from the innovation process, comes from the team running an experiment. You run an experiment and you identify, look, your conversion rate was never above and never below. That goes into your Monte Carlo simulation. And now if you take that particular number and you're basically presenting it to the executives, you say, look, this particular team has a risk-adjusted ROI of X, or a risk-adjusted whatever revenue, then the conversation becomes way more concrete. That risk-adjusted thing will obviously change over time as more evidence is gathered, so you can plot that on a map. We always encourage that in our practice. We have a software that's helping that. People are kept in check, and that's embedded in what we do. The thing about it is that the teams need to be educated. And yes, to your point, it's part of the innovation accounting system. We talk about risk-adjusted revenue and risk-adjusted value to cost ratio. That risk adjustment comes from this Monte Carlo simulations, but it's also a combination of this plus the confidence decision makers have in the ventures.
All right, we're out of time, I know. So just due to time, wanted to kind of wrap us up. I'm sure we could talk for a lot longer. Thank all of you for being with us. Yes, you will get slides. If Dan, you can send me those in PDFs, great.
Sure.
Them out, as well as the recording. And hopefully all of you can connect on LinkedIn and keep connected with us. Everything for us, we believe, starts with the business model. That's what Aaron was really alluding to, that Dan was talking about. Got to have something of value there, and then how do we obviously measure it and monitor that and account for it. So we're happy to have you guys join us on this journey to help really educate, and from entrepreneurs to entrepreneurs, startups to corporates alike. We will be back next week, and then the following several weeks in addition to that. So we hope you join us, and the website maybe we can put the link here real quick in the chat. I think Cameron might do that. And you can join the other ones, and again, all free. But I was wanting you to help me say thank you with the Zoom waves and emojis and everything to Dan for being here, and we really appreciate your time today. And hopefully, stay connected with us, and continue to evangelize entrepreneurship and innovation. Appreciate your work.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much, Brian, for having me.
You're welcome, Dan. Take care. Rest of you have a great night around the world. I know it's late some places, so have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.